My name is Greg Turner, and 3 weeks ago I thought I had everything figured out. Decent job as a financial analyst in downtown Boston, a brownstone in Back Bay that I'd been paying off for 8 years, and Ashley Marquette, the woman I was supposed to marry in exactly 47 days. Ashley runs a high-end wedding planning business called Marquette Moments, which sounds pretentious as hell, but pulls in serious money. She's got this way of making every conversation sound like a business pitch, complete with hand gestures that belong in a boardroom presentation. Even when she's ordering coffee, she treats the barista like a potential client. "Greg, darling, we need to discuss the final head count," she announced that Tuesday morning, sliding into our kitchen with her phone pressed against her ear like it was surgically attached. She wore that cream-colored blazer she reserves for important meetings, the one that costs more than my monthly car payment. I was trying to enjoy my coffee and scan the sports section when she dropped the first bomb. "I've decided to extend my Bachelorette trip to Italy, 2 weeks instead of 1. The newspaper crinkled in my hands. "2 weeks? Ashley, the wedding is next month." She waved me off with perfectly manicured fingers. "Sloan thinks I need the extra time to decompress, and Luca offered to extend his hospitality. Luca Belanti, her ex-boyfriend from college, the guy who owns 3 trendy restaurants in the North End and posts Instagram photos of himself making pasta like he's auditioning for a cooking show. Dark hair, Italian accent that he definitely plays up for the cameras, and the kind of smile that makes middle-aged women leave 5-star Yelp reviews. Your ex-boyfriend is hosting your bachelorette party?" I set down my coffee cup harder than necessary. "Oh, Greg, don't be so insecure. Luca and I are ancient history. He's simply being generous with his villa in Tuscany." She finally looked up from her phone, giving me that patient smile she uses when she thinks I'm being unreasonable. "Besides, Sloan and Tara will be there the whole time." Sloan Murphy, her maid of honor, treats Instagram like a full-time job and has never met a piece of gossip she couldn't spread across 3 social media platforms. Tara Chen, bridesmaid number 2, works in marketing and has this habit of giving me looks like she's trying to warn me about something she can't quite say out loud. 2 weeks in Italy with your ex-boyfriend sounds like the plot of a romantic comedy, Ashley. Don't be dramatic. She grabbed her purse, a designer thing that costs more than most people's rent, and headed for the door. "I'll call you tonight. Try not to stress about the seating arrangements while I'm gone." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone with my coffee and a growing sense that my carefully planned life was about to go sideways. That evening, I met my office buddy Jules Martinez at Murphy's Pub, a dive bar 3 blocks from our building that serves decent burgers and doesn't blast music loud enough to require sign language. Jules is one of those guys who sees everything and says just enough to let you know he's paying attention. He's been working financial analysis longer than me, survived 2 market crashes, and has developed the kind of cynical worldview that comes from watching people make the same mistakes over and over again. "So Ashley's spending 2 weeks in Italy with her ex," I said, staring into my beer like it might contain answers. "The chef guy? The one who looks like he stepped out of a cologne advertisement?" "That's the one." Jules signaled the bartender for another round. "You know what I'd do? Enlighten me. I'd ask myself why my fiancée needs 2 weeks away from me right before our wedding to decompress with a guy she used to sleep with." The bartender slid 2 fresh beers across the scarred wooden bar. The place smelled like fried onions and decades of spilled drinks, but it felt more honest than the upscale wine bars Ashley preferred. "She says Sloan thinks she needs the time." "Sloan Murphy? The woman who posts 17 Instagram stories before breakfast? That's your relationship counselor now?" I took a long drink and tried to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. "Ashley's not like that. She's focused on her business, sure, but she's not—" "Not what?" Not the type to have second thoughts about marrying a financial analyst when she could be living it up in Tuscany with some Italian restaurant owner? The thing about Jules is that he never says anything just to be cruel. He's got this way of cutting through the noise and pointing out what you already know, but don't want to admit. My phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. "Boarding now. The villa looks amazing. Luca says hello." I showed Jules the message. He read it and shook his head. "Greg, buddy, when was the last time you went somewhere amazing and your first instinct was to tell your girlfriend that some other woman said hello?" I didn't have a good answer for that. The next morning, I was sitting at my desk trying to focus on quarterly reports when Rick Donovan stopped by my cubicle. Rick works in marketing 2 floors up and somehow became part of Ashley's social circle after we started dating. He's got that aggressively friendly personality that makes you feel like you're being sold something even when he's just saying good morning. "Hey Greg, how's the wedding planning going? Ashley must be having a blast in Italy." "She just left yesterday, Rick." Right. Well, Luca's place is supposed to be incredible. Did you see the photos Sloan posted? That infinity pool is insane." I hadn't seen any photos. Ashley had been gone less than 24 hours. "You follow Sloan on Instagram?" "Oh, you know how it is. Ashley added me to all her friends' accounts when we started hanging out. Great way to keep up with everyone." Something about the way he said it bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. Rick lingered by my desk like he wanted to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. "Well, anyway, I'm sure you're looking forward to having some bachelor time. Maybe hit up some bars, catch up with old friends." "I'm pretty busy with work, Rick." Of course. "Well, if you change your mind, let me know. I know some great places." After he left, I pulled up Instagram on my phone and searched for Sloane's account. Her latest story showed a first-class airplane meal with the caption, "Italy bound with my girls." The next slide was a selfie of her, Ashley, and Tara raising champagne glasses in what looked like a very expensive airplane cabin. The third slide made my chest tighten. It was a photo of a massive stone villa perched on a hillside, surrounded by vineyards and olive trees. The caption read, "Luca's family estate. 2 weeks of pure paradise." 2 weeks at Luca's family estate with my fiancée. I closed the app and tried to get back to work, but the numbers on my screen kept blurring together. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself checking my phone for messages from Ashley. Nothing. By lunch, I'd made a decision that surprised me. I walked 6 blocks to a small office above a pizza shop where a guy named Manny Rodriguez runs a private investigation business. I'd found his name through a Google search and 20 minutes of reading reviews from people who'd discovered their spouses were cheating. Manny looked exactly like what you'd expect from a former Boston cop turned private investigator, thick build, graying hair, and the kind of direct stare that makes you feel like he's already figured out your whole story. "Let me guess," he said before I'd even sat down. "Your wife's in Italy with her ex-boyfriend, and you want to know if you're being paranoid." "Fiancée, and how did you—" 23 years on the force, 8 years doing this. You get good at reading people." He leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "What's the situation?" Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I told him everything. Ashley's sudden decision to extend the trip, Luca's villa, Sloane's Instagram posts, Rick's weird comments. As I talked, Manny took notes in a small leather notebook, occasionally asking questions that made me realize how many details I'd been ignoring. This Luca character, he's got money? 3 restaurants, family estate in Italy, drives a Tesla, posts photos of himself cooking for celebrities. And your fiancé's in the wedding business. Expensive taste? I thought about Ashley's designer clothes, her insistence on the most expensive wedding venue in Boston, the way she talked about our honeymoon like it was a business investment in our brand as a couple. Yeah, expensive taste. Manny closed his notebook and quoted me a price that made me wince. But it was less than what I'd already spent on wedding flowers, and I had a feeling those flowers were going to be a waste of money anyway. "I'll need 3 days to get you some real information. Photos, financial records, phone records if possible." You sure you want to know what I find? I thought about Ashley's dismissive wave when I'd expressed concern about spending 2 weeks with her ex. I thought about Rick's knowing smile and Sloane's Instagram stories. I thought about the fact that my fiancé had been gone for less than a day and hadn't sent me a single message. Yeah, I want to know. Manny called me on Friday afternoon. 3 words that changed everything. We need to talk. His office felt smaller this time, maybe because of the manila envelope sitting on his desk, like a loaded weapon. Manny's expression was the kind of carefully neutral look that cops probably practice in the mirror, the face you use when you're about to ruin someone's day. Your fiancé checked into the Hotel Villa San Martino in Tuscany on Wednesday night, he said, sliding the first photo across his desk. Reservation was made for 2 people, Mr. and Mrs. Belanti. The photo showed Ashley and Luca walking through an elegant hotel lobby, his hand on the small of her back in a way that looked practiced, comfortable. She was laughing at something he'd said, her head tilted toward him with an intimacy that made my stomach drop. There's more. The next photo was a receipt from a jewelry store in Florence. $5,000 for a diamond bracelet, purchased by Luca Belanti on Thursday morning. The third photo showed Ashley wearing that same bracelet while feeding Luca gelato at a sidewalk cafe. Sloane and Tara? I managed to ask. Different hotel, about 20 minutes away. They've been doing tourist stuff during the day, but your fiancé's been spending her evenings with the chef. Manny slid over a printed email exchange between Ashley and Luca, dated 2 weeks before her trip. The subject line was, "Our second chance." I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't need to. Phrases like, "Greg will never understand what we had," and "this wedding is a mistake," told me everything I needed to know. How did you get these? Luca's not as smart as he thinks he is, uses the same password for everything, posts his location on social media every 5 minutes, and pays for everything with credit cards. Your fiancé's been planning this for at least a month. The final piece of evidence was a screenshot of a text message from Ashley to Sloane. Luca proposed last night. I said yes. I'll figure out how to handle Greg when I get back. I stared at the phone screen until the words stopped making sense. Ashley was engaged. To Luca. While still engaged to me. "What's your move?" Manny asked. I thought about all the money I'd already spent on our wedding. The venue deposit, the flowers, the photographer, the band. I thought about the invitations sitting in boxes in our living room, waiting to be mailed. I thought about my coworkers who'd been asking about bachelor parties and honeymoon plans. Then I thought about Ashley's dismissive wave and her patient smile when she thought I was being unreasonable. "Can you get me copies of everything?" "Already done." He handed me a USB drive. "What else?" I pulled out my phone and called the wedding venue. It took 15 minutes of hold music and 3 transfers, but eventually I reached someone who could help me. "I'd like to cancel my wedding reservation for next month," I said, watching Manny's eyebrows rise. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Turner. There will be a cancellation fee." "I understand, but I'd like to use the venue for a different event instead. Same date, same time, a welcome home party." After I hung up, Manny was grinning. "A welcome home party?" "Ashley's flight lands Sunday at 6:30. Logan Airport, Terminal E. I think she deserves a proper welcome home, don't you?" "You want me there?" "Bring a camera." Saturday morning, I drove to my lawyer's office in downtown Boston. Melanie Foster specializes in family law and has a reputation for being tougher than a $2 steak. She's the kind of lawyer who wears power suits like armor and treats every conversation like a negotiation she intends to win. "You want to sue your fiancé for what exactly?" I showed her Manny's evidence, the hotel receipts, the emails, the jewelry purchase, the text messages. Melanie studied everything with the focused attention of a surgeon examining x-rays. "Emotional distress, breach of promise, return of the engagement ring," she said finally. "The ring alone is worth what? 15,000? 18. We can make this hurt, especially if she's planning to marry this Italian guy while still engaged to you. That's fraud, technically. How long to draw up the papers? I can have everything ready by Sunday morning. You want her served at the airport? In front of as many people as possible. Melanie's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I like your style, Greg. Sunday evening, I stood in Logan Airport's Terminal E with a small army. Melanie wore her most intimidating black suit and carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my car. Manny had positioned himself near the baggage claim with a camera that looked professional enough to belong to a news crew. A process server named Tony waited by the arrival gate with legal papers that would officially ruin Ashley's homecoming. At 6:45, passengers from Alitalia Flight 623 began streaming through the arrival gate. I spotted Sloane first, impossible to miss with her bright red hair and the way she was already posing for selfies in the terminal. Tara followed, looking tired and scrolling through her phone. Then Ashley appeared, and for a moment I forgot why I was angry. She looked radiant. Italy had given her a golden tan that made her blue eyes seem brighter. She wore a flowing white dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and the diamond bracelet on her wrist caught the fluorescent lights like a beacon. She was laughing at something on her phone, probably a message from Luca. She saw me, and her expression shifted from surprise to guilt to annoyance in the space of 3 seconds. Greg, what are you doing here? Welcome home, honey. I stepped aside, and Tony, the process server, moved forward. Ashley Marquette, you've been served. The envelope hit her hands like a physical blow. Around us, other passengers were slowing down to watch the drama unfold. Sloane's mouth fell open. Tara took a step back like she wanted to disappear. Ashley ripped open the envelope and scanned the first page. Her tan seemed to fade as she read, You're suing me? Breach of promise, emotional distress, and return of my grandmother's ring, the one you've been wearing while playing house with your Italian boyfriend. Her voice rose an octave. You had me followed? I had my fiancée investigated when she started acting like she was already married to someone else. I gestured to Manny, who was capturing everything with his camera. Say hello to the evidence. A small crowd had gathered now. Airport security was approaching, but slowly, they seemed as curious about the drama as everyone else. Ashley's face cycled through several emotions before settling on righteous indignation. You're making a scene, Greg. Am I? Because it seems like you made the scene when you accepted another man's proposal while wearing my ring. That got a reaction from the crowd. Someone whispered, Oh, snap, and I heard at least 2 phones taking pictures. Sloane finally found her voice. Ashley, what is he talking about? I pulled out my phone and showed her one of Manny's photos, Ashley and Luca at the cafe, her left hand clearly visible with both rings. Your maid of honor didn't tell you. Ashley's engaged to Luca now. Happened Thursday night, according to her text messages. The crowd was growing larger. Airport security had arrived, but seemed content to watch unless things got physical. Ashley looked around at all the faces staring at her and seemed to realize that her carefully curated public image was crumbling in real time. This is insane, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. What's insane is planning a wedding with one guy while secretly planning a life with another. I held out my hand. The ring, Ashley. I'm not giving you anything. Melanie stepped forward. Ms. Marquette, the ring is specifically mentioned in the lawsuit. You can return it now or explain to a judge why you kept it after accepting another proposal. Your choice. Ashley looked at Sloane and Tara for support, but both women were staring at her like they'd never seen her before. The crowd was getting restless, phones were recording, and airport security was starting to look impatient. Finally, Ashley yanked both rings off her finger and threw them at my feet. There. Are you happy now? I bent down and picked up my grandmother's ring, leaving Luca's bracelet on the terminal floor. Getting there. As I walked away, I could hear Ashley trying to explain herself to Sloane and Tara, her voice rising in panic. The crowd was dispersing, but slowly, like people leaving a really good movie. Manny fell into step beside me. "That was beautiful, man. You get everything you wanted?" I looked back at Ashley, who was now crying while Sloane took pictures that would definitely end up on Instagram within the hour. Not even close. Monday morning hit me like a freight train made of regret and caffeine withdrawal. I'd barely slept, partly from adrenaline and partly from the growing realization that embarrassing Ashley at the airport was just the opening move in what was about to become an all-out war. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. with text messages from people who'd seen Sloane's Instagram stories about the airport incident. Apparently, she'd posted a 3-part saga complete with crying selfies and vague references to toxic masculinity and public humiliation tactics. Jules knocked on my cubicle wall at 9:15. "Heard you had an interesting Sunday." News travels fast. Rick from marketing has been telling everyone who'll listen that you ambushed Ashley at the airport with lawyers and photographers. Says you're having some kind of breakdown. That got my attention. "Rick was there?" "Nah, but he seems to know an awful lot of details for someone who heard it secondhand." I was still processing that when my desk phone rang. My supervisor, Janet Morrison, wanted to see me in her office. Immediately. Janet's been managing our department for 12 years and has the kind of no-nonsense personality that makes grown men apologize for things they didn't do. Her office walls are covered with certificates and awards that basically say she's very good at making sure financial analysts don't screw up. "Greg, sit down. We need to talk." I sat. The chair across from her desk suddenly felt like it was designed for interrogations. "I received some concerning information about your personal life this morning." "Concerning how?" "Rick Donovan from marketing stopped by. He's worried about you. Says you've been acting erratically, following your fiancée to Italy, harassing her friends, making threats." Every word hit me like a slap. "I never went to Italy, Janet, and I haven't threatened anyone." He also mentioned something about you hiring private investigators to stalk Ashley and her friends. Is that true? I could see where this was going. Rick had somehow gotten ahead of the story, spinning my investigation into something that made me look unstable and potentially dangerous. I hired a private investigator to look into my fiancée's activities because I suspected she was cheating on me, which she was. I have proof. Janet's expression didn't change. "Greg, I'm going to be direct with you. Your personal problems can't affect your work environment. If you're going through a difficult time, we have employee assistance programs. Janet, I'm not having a breakdown. My fiancé was planning to leave me for another man while still planning our wedding. I found out about it and ended the relationship. That's not erratic behavior, that's common sense." Then explain the scene at the airport. Rick says there were lawyers involved, process servers, some kind of public confrontation. I realized that Rick had somehow gotten detailed information about Sunday's events, which meant either he'd been in contact with Ashley or Sloane, or he'd been keeping much closer tabs on my situation than I'd realized. "How does Rick know so much about what happened at the airport?" Janet frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Rick wasn't there. So how does he know about the lawyers and process servers? How does he know enough details to come in here and paint me as unstable?" I assumed he heard it from mutual friends. "Janet, the only mutual friends Rick and I have are Ashley's friends, which means he's been talking to Ashley about this situation, which means he's not a concerned coworker. He's someone with a stake in making me look bad." I could see the wheels turning in Janet's head. She'd been managing people long enough to recognize when someone was being played. "I'm going to look into this further," she said finally. "But Greg, I need you to keep your personal drama out of the office. Whatever's going on between you and Ashley, handle it outside these walls." Understood. I left her office feeling like I'd dodged a bullet, but also realizing that Ashley's counterattack was more sophisticated than I'd given her credit for. She wasn't just defending herself, she was actively working to undermine my credibility and isolate me from anyone who might support me. That afternoon, I decided to test a theory. I walked up to Rick's office on the 3rd floor, carrying a manila folder that contained absolutely nothing important but looked official enough to justify the visit. Rick's cubicle was decorated with photos of himself at various networking events, shaking hands with people who looked like they owned things. He had the kind of aggressively organized workspace that suggested he spent more time managing his image than doing actual work. "Hey, Rick, got a minute?" His smile was a little too bright, a little too quick. "Of course, Greg. How are you holding up? I heard about the situation with Ashley. Rough stuff, man." "Yeah, it's been challenging. I appreciate you checking in with Janet about me. Shows real concern." Something flickered in his eyes. "Well, we're all worried about you. This kind of stress can really affect someone's judgment." "Absolutely. Hey, quick question. How did you hear about what happened at the airport? I'm trying to figure out how the story got out." Rick's smile faltered for just a second. "Oh, you know how these things spread. Social media, mutual friends." "Right, but the details you mentioned to Janet, the lawyers, the process servers, that stuff wasn't on social media. Sloane's Instagram stories were pretty vague." Well, I think Ashley might have mentioned something to someone who mentioned it to me. You know how it is." "When did you talk to Ashley?" "I didn't talk to her directly. It was more like through the grapevine." I nodded like that made perfect sense. "The grapevine. Got it. Well, anyway, I wanted to thank you for looking out for me. It's good to know who your real friends are." As I walked back to my desk, I pulled out my phone and called Manny. "I need you to look into Rick Donovan. Works in marketing, seems to know more about Ashley's situation than he should." "You think he's involved?" "I think he's been feeding information to someone, and I want to know who. Give me 24 hours. Tuesday morning brought another surprise. I arrived at work to find my computer password had been changed overnight. When I called IT, they told me there'd been a security incident involving my workstation and that I needed to speak with Janet immediately. Janet's office felt even smaller this time, partly because there were 2 other people in it, someone from IT and someone from HR who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Greg, we found some concerning files on your computer yesterday evening." The IT guy, whose name tag said Kevin, opened a laptop and showed me a series of screenshots. Photos of Ashley and Luca in Italy, copies of their email exchanges, screenshots of text messages. "These files were accessed multiple times during work hours yesterday," Kevin continued. "Company policy is pretty clear about using work computers for personal investigations." I stared at the screen. "Those files aren't mine. They're in a folder labeled Ashley Evidence on your desktop." "Kevin, I never created a folder called Ashley Evidence. I have copies of those photos on a USB drive at home, but I've never accessed them on my work computer." Janet looked skeptical. "Then how did they get there?" "Someone put them there. Someone who had access to my workstation and wanted to make it look like I was using company resources for personal business." The HR representative, whose name I'd already forgotten, spoke up. "Mr. Turner, are you suggesting that someone deliberately planted evidence on your computer?" "That's exactly what I'm suggesting." "Who would do something like that?" I thought about Rick's nervous smile and his detailed knowledge of events he shouldn't have known about. Someone who wants to make me look unstable and unprofessional. Someone who's been feeding information to my ex-fiancée and trying to undermine my credibility. Kevin frowned at his laptop screen. "Actually, that's interesting. The metadata on these files shows they were copied from an external source yesterday around 2 p.m. But your keycard shows you were in meetings from 1:30 to 4. Janet leaned forward. "So Greg couldn't have copied these files?" "Not unless he did it remotely, which would require admin access that he doesn't have." The HR representative was taking notes now. Who else has access to Greg's workstation? Anyone with a master key card. Maintenance, security, department heads. Kevin paused. And anyone who knows his password. I changed my password last week, I said. The only person who might know it is... I stopped, remembering a conversation from 2 weeks ago, when Rick had stopped by my desk while I was logging in. He'd made some joke about password security, and I'd made some joke back about using my fiancée's birthday. Ashley's birthday, which Rick definitely knew since he'd been to her birthday party 3 months ago. This is getting complicated, Janet said. Kevin, can you trace who accessed Greg's workstation yesterday? I can pull keycard records and see who was on this floor during the relevant time period. 20 minutes later, we had our answer. Rick Donovan's keycard had been used to access our floor at 2:15 p.m. yesterday, right around the time the files were copied to my computer. Janet's expression was somewhere between anger and disappointment. Greg, I owe you an apology, and Rick Donovan owes us all an explanation. By Wednesday morning, Rick was gone, fired for unauthorized access to another employee's workstation and violation of company computer policies. But his departure felt less like a victory and more like confirmation that Ashley's campaign against me was more organized and vindictive than I'd realized. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on actual work for the first time in a week, when Tara Chen called my cell phone. Greg, it's Tara, Ashley's bridesmaid. Can we talk? I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me for coffee after work? There are some things about Ashley that I think you should know. We met at a small cafe in Cambridge, far enough from both our offices that we were unlikely to run into anyone we knew. Tara looked tired, like she'd been wrestling with a difficult decision. I should have said something sooner, she began. About Ashley and Luca. I knew something was going on before she left for Italy. What kind of something? Phone calls at weird hours, secret meetings she claimed were business-related, and the way she talked about your wedding, like it was this obligation she had to get through instead of something she was excited about. Tara pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of a text conversation between her and Ashley from 2 weeks ago. Ashley. I think I'm making a huge mistake with Greg. Tara. Cold feet are normal. Talk to him. Ashley. It's not cold feet. It's that I keep thinking about what my life could be like with someone else. Someone else meaning Luca. She never said his name, but yeah. She'd get these dreamy looks whenever his restaurant got mentioned in the papers, or when someone brought up Italy, or when she talked about authentic relationships. Tara scrolled through more messages. Here's the one that really bothered me. Ashley. Greg's a good guy, but he's so predictable. Luca makes me feel alive. Tara. Ashley, you're engaged to Greg. Ashley. Engagements can be broken, especially when there's something better waiting. I stared at the phone screen until the words blurred together. Why are you showing me this now? Because what happened at the airport was awful, but what Ashley's doing now is worse. She's telling everyone that you're obsessive and controlling, that you hired people to stalk her in Italy, that you're trying to ruin her business out of spite. Is it working? With some people, yeah. Sloane's completely on her side, obviously, but other people are starting to ask questions, like why Ashley was wearing 2 engagement rings in Italy if she wasn't cheating. Tara put her phone away and looked at me directly. Greg, I don't know what you're planning to do next, but whatever it is, you should know that Ashley's not done fighting. She's talking about suing you for harassment and defamation. She thinks she can destroy your reputation before you can destroy hers. I thought about Rick's attempt to sabotage my job, Ashley's social media campaign, and the wedding venue that was still reserved for our welcome home party in 10 days. Thanks for the warning, Tara. Are you going to be okay? I finished my coffee and stood up. I'm going to be fine, but Ashley's going to wish she'd stayed in Italy. Thursday morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that comes from finally understanding the rules of the game you're playing. Ashley wanted to destroy my reputation? Fine. Two could play that game, and I had home field advantage. My first stop was Manny's office, where I found him reviewing surveillance photos with the focused attention of a chess master planning his next move. I need everything you have on Ashley's business, I told him. Client lists, vendor relationships, social media analytics, financial records if you can get them legally. Manny raised an eyebrow. You want to go after her professionally? I want to understand her vulnerabilities. Ashley's built her entire identity around being this successful, sophisticated wedding planner with perfect taste and perfect relationships. What happens when people start questioning whether she can actually maintain a relationship herself? Reputational warfare. I like it. Manny pulled out a thick folder. Already started pulling some threads. Your ex-fiancée's business is more fragile than it looks. The first document was a credit report showing that Marquette Moments was carrying significant debt. Ashley had been using business loans to fund her lifestyle, betting that future bookings would cover current expenses. She's been living off credit for 8 months, Manny explained. The Italy trip? Paid for with a business credit card that's already maxed out. The second document was more interesting, a list of Ashley's current clients, including 3 high-profile weddings scheduled for the next 2 months. Rich people who'd hired her specifically because of her reputation for discretion and professionalism. What happens if those clients start hearing rumors about their wedding planner's personal drama? Rich people hate scandal, Manny said, especially when it might reflect badly on their own events. I studied the client list and recognized 2 names, a city councilman's daughter and the heir to a local real estate fortune. Both families were prominent enough to make the society pages, which meant they were prominent enough to care about their wedding planner's public image. Can you get me contact information for these clients? Greg, be careful. There's a line between fighting back and harassment. I'm not planning to harass anyone. I'm planning to make sure they have accurate information about the person they've hired to handle their most important day. That afternoon, I created a new email account and sent carefully worded messages to Ashley's 3 biggest clients. Nothing threatening, nothing that could be construed as defamatory, just helpful links to Sloane's Instagram stories about the airport incident and a few of Manny's photos from Italy. The subject line was simple. Information about your wedding planner you might find relevant. By Friday morning, 2 of those clients had canceled their contracts with Marquette Moments. Ashley called me at 11 a.m., her voice shaking with rage. You contacted my clients. I shared publicly available information with people who might be interested in their wedding planner's approach to commitment and fidelity. That's harassment, Greg. I can have you arrested. For sending people links to Instagram posts? Good luck with that. You're trying to destroy my business. I'm trying to make sure people have accurate information about who they're hiring. If that destroys your business, maybe the problem isn't with the information. She hung up on me, but I knew the real conversation was just beginning. Saturday night, Ashley made her next move. She was hosting a networking event at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, an evening of elegance designed to showcase her services to potential high-end clients, the kind of event where she'd normally be in her element, working the room with champagne and business cards. I decided to attend. The hotel ballroom was decorated like something from a magazine spread. White flowers, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of ambient lighting that makes everyone look like they belong in a luxury advertisement. Ashley wore a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and worked the crowd with the practiced charm of a politician running for office. I bought a ticket under a fake name and arrived fashionably late, when the room was crowded enough for me to blend in. Ashley was holding court near the bar, telling a group of potential clients about her authentic approach to romantic celebrations. That's when I activated my plan. Earlier that week, I'd had a conversation with the hotel's audio-visual technician, a guy named Mike, who'd been dealing with demanding event planners for 15 years and had developed a healthy skepticism about people who treated service workers like furniture. Mike had agreed to help me with a small technical demonstration in exchange for a generous tip and the promise that no one would get physically hurt. At exactly 9 p.m., the room's sound system crackled to life with a familiar voice. Ashley's voice, recorded during one of her phone conversations with Luca in Italy. "Greg's such a boring little man," her amplified voice announced to the ballroom full of wedding industry professionals. "He thinks marriage is about commitment and stability. God, can you imagine anything more suffocating?" The room went quiet. Ashley's face turned the color of her white flowers. Luca's voice came through the speakers next. "When we're married, we'll show people what real passion looks like." Ashley. I almost feel sorry for Greg. He has no idea what he's missing, but honestly, he's too conventional to ever understand what we have. The recording continued for another 30 seconds, just long enough for everyone in the room to understand exactly what they were hearing. Ashley tried to reach the sound booth, but Mike had already disappeared, leaving her to face a ballroom full of people who'd just heard her mock her fiancé while planning to leave him for another man. The silence that followed was deafening. I walked over to Ashley, who was standing frozen in the middle of the dance floor like a deer in headlights. "Authentic approach to romantic celebrations," I said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I couldn't agree more. Then I left, walking past tables full of wedding industry professionals who were already pulling out their phones to share the gossip that would be all over social media by morning. Sunday morning, Sloane's Instagram account told the story of Ashley's social destruction in real time. Her latest posts showed a nearly empty hotel ballroom, confused-looking vendors, and a series of increasingly frantic stories about sabotage and illegal recording. But the damage was already done. By noon, Ashleygate was trending locally, and 3 more clients had canceled their contracts with Marquette moments. Ashley called me again, this time crying. "You've ruined everything. I played a recording of you talking about your authentic feelings. If that ruined everything, maybe everything was built on a lie. Greg, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can..." "Ashley, you're engaged to another man. There's nothing to work out. I made a mistake. Luca was just... It was just the excitement of being in Italy. It didn't mean anything. It meant enough for you to accept his proposal." I was confused. I was scared about the wedding, about commitment, about whether we were right for each other. And now you're not confused anymore? Now I know that I love you, that I want to marry you, that everything with Luca was just a fantasy. I looked out my apartment window at the Boston skyline, thinking about all the ways this conversation could go. Ashley was offering me exactly what I'd thought I wanted 2 weeks ago. An apology, an explanation, a chance to rebuild what we'd had. But I'd spent the last week learning things about Ashley that I couldn't unknow. Her willingness to lie, to manipulate, to destroy my reputation when it served her purposes. The contempt in her voice when she talked about me to Luca. The calculated way she'd tried to turn my friends and co-workers against me. "It's too late, Ashley. It's not too late. We can start over. We can..." "You called me a boring little man who could never understand what real passion looks like. You planned to leave me while still planning our wedding. You tried to get me fired from my job. Starting over isn't an option. Then what do you want? How do I make this right?" I thought about the wedding venue that was still reserved for next Saturday, about the invitations that had never been mailed, about the life I'd thought I was building with someone who turned out to be a stranger. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences, Ashley, and your consequences are just getting started. The thing about revenge is that it's like a good wine. It gets better with time, but only if you're patient enough to let it develop properly." By Monday morning, I'd been patient for exactly 2 weeks, and my vintage was ready to serve. Ashley's business was hemorrhaging clients faster than a punctured balloon. Her social media accounts were flooded with comments ranging from supportive to savage, with the savage comments significantly outnumbering the supportive ones. The wedding industry, it turns out, is a surprisingly small community where reputation matters more than almost anything else. But Ashley wasn't finished fighting. If anything, her desperation was making her more dangerous. Tara called me Tuesday morning with a warning. Ashley's planning something for this weekend. She won't tell me what, but she's been making phone calls and meeting with people. She thinks she can still salvage this situation. What kind of people? I don't know. But yesterday she was talking about setting the record straight and showing everyone who Greg really is. She's convinced that if she can make you look bad enough, people will forget about her own problems. That afternoon, I got a call from Melanie, my lawyer. Ashley's attorney contacted me about a settlement, she said. They're offering to return the ring and pay your legal fees if you agree to stop what they're calling a harassment campaign against her business. What kind of harassment campaign? Contacting her clients, recording private conversations, disrupting her business events. They're claiming you're engaged in a systematic effort to destroy her livelihood. Am I? Greg, I'm your lawyer, not your therapist. But if you are, you should know that Ashley's team is building a case for a restraining order. They want to paint you as obsessive and potentially dangerous. I thought about Rick's attempt to sabotage my job, Ashley's social media campaign against me, and her phone call begging for reconciliation just 3 days ago. Melanie, what would happen if I could prove that Ashley initiated this whole conflict? That she's been actively working to damage my reputation and career while simultaneously trying to manipulate me into taking her back? That would change things significantly. Do you have proof? I'm working on it. Wednesday evening, I put the final phase of my plan into motion. I sent Ashley a text message that I knew would get her attention. I've been thinking about what you said on Sunday. Maybe we should talk. Dinner Saturday night? I reserved our old table at Mistral. She responded within 5 minutes. Really? You want to try again? I want to understand what happened, and I want to see if there's anything left to save. Greg, I love you. I know I screwed up, but I love you. Saturday at 8. Come alone. Of course, I hadn't actually reserved a table at Mistral. Instead, I'd reserved the private dining room at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, the same hotel where Ashley's networking event had been so spectacularly sabotaged the previous weekend. But this time, Ashley wouldn't be the only guest. I spent Thursday and Friday reaching out to everyone who'd been part of our social circle over the past year. Jules from work, Tara, and even Sloan, Rick's replacement from marketing, several couples we'd had dinner with, Ashley's business associates who'd attended her networking event, and even Manny and Melanie. The invitation was simple. Join me for a farewell dinner Saturday night. It's time to close this chapter properly. Some people were curious, some were concerned, a few were excited about the potential drama, but everyone accepted. Saturday at 7:30, I stood in the private dining room of the Fairmont Copley Plaza, watching 23 people find their seats around tables decorated with white flowers that looked suspiciously similar to the ones Ashley had chosen for her sabotaged networking event. Ashley arrived at exactly 8 p.m., wearing the same black cocktail dress she'd worn the previous weekend. She looked around the room with growing confusion and alarm. Greg, what is this? This is our farewell dinner. I thought it was important for everyone to hear the whole story before we officially end things. You said you wanted to talk. You said you wanted to see if we could work things out. I lied, just like you've been lying for months. Ashley looked around the room, recognizing faces, calculating alliances, trying to figure out how to control a situation that was already spiraling beyond her control. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, raising a glass of wine. Thank you for joining me tonight. I know many of you have been confused about what's been happening between Ashley and me over the past few weeks. Tonight, I want to set the record straight. I walked over to a laptop connected to a large screen and clicked the first slide of a presentation I'd been working on for days. 3 weeks ago, I thought I was engaged to a woman who loved me. 2 weeks ago, I discovered that woman was planning to leave me for her ex-boyfriend, while still planning our wedding. Tonight, you're going to see exactly how that discovery unfolded. The first slide showed Ashley's text message to Sloane. Luca proposed last night. I said yes. I'll figure out how to handle Greg when I get back. Ashley's face went pale. Greg, you can't do this. The second slide shows the hotel registration in Italy, Mr. and Mrs. Belanti, while she was still engaged to me. Sloane was staring at Ashley with a mixture of shock and betrayal. Several other guests were taking pictures of the screen with their phones. The third slide shows Ashley's business credit report, revealing that she's been using business loans to fund a lifestyle she can't afford, including her romantic getaway to Italy. This is harassment, Ashley said, her voice rising. This is illegal. The fourth slide shows the email exchanges between Ashley and Rick Donovan, coordinating an effort to get me fired from my job by planting evidence on my work computer. That got everyone's attention. Rick's replacement from marketing was taking notes like he was planning to write a report. And the final slide shows Ashley's phone records, proving that she's been in daily contact with Luca since returning from Italy, while simultaneously trying to convince me that their relationship was just a mistake. Ashley was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and humiliation. You want to know who Greg really is? She screamed at the room. He's a vindictive, obsessive control freak who can't handle being rejected. He hired private investigators to stalk me. He sabotaged my business events. He's trying to destroy my life because his ego can't handle the fact that I chose someone better. The room was silent for a moment. Then Tara stood up. Ashley, I showed Greg the text messages where you called him boring and predictable. I told him about the secret phone calls and meetings. I warned him that you were planning to leave him. Sloane was scrolling through her phone, probably comparing Ashley's version of events with the evidence on the screen. Ashley, you told me Greg was being paranoid. You said there was nothing going on with Luca. You lied to everyone, Jules added. You made Greg look like a jealous psycho while you were actually cheating on him. Ashley looked around the room desperately, but the faces staring back at her ranged from disappointed to disgusted. Her carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time, just like it had at her networking event. I made mistakes, she said finally. But Greg's response has been completely disproportionate. He's been systematically destroying my reputation and my business. I walked over to the laptop and clicked one more slide, a recording of our phone conversation from Sunday when Ashley had begged me to take her back. Her voice filled the room. Greg, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. I made a mistake. Luca was just the excitement of being in Italy. It didn't mean anything. My voice responded, Ashley, you're engaged to another man. Ashley, I was confused. I was scared about the wedding, about commitment, about whether we were right for each other. Now I know that I love you, that I want to marry you, that everything with Luca was just a fantasy. The room was completely silent now. Ashley's claims about my obsessive behavior were hard to reconcile with the recording of her desperately trying to win me back just 6 days ago. So let me get this straight, Melanie said, speaking for the first time since dinner began. You cheated on Greg, planned to leave him for another man, tried to get him fired from his job, publicly accused him of harassment and stalking, and then begged him to take you back when your plan backfired. Ashley didn't answer. And now you want us to believe that Greg's the villain in this story? I think we've heard enough, I said, closing the laptop. Ashley, I hope you and Luca are very happy together. But your days of manipulating people and playing victim are over. Ashley grabbed her purse and headed for the door, but stopped and turned back to face the room. This isn't over, Greg. You think you've won, but this isn't over. Yes, it is. She left, and the room slowly came back to life with conversations and questions and the kind of animated discussion that follows really good theater. Manny walked over to me with a grin. That was beautiful, man. Clean, thorough, and completely devastating. Think it'll stick? Brother, after tonight, Ashley Marquette's reputation in this city is finished. No one's going to trust her with their wedding, their business, or their secrets. Jules raised his glass. To Greg Turner, who proved that boring, predictable guys can be absolutely ruthless when pushed too far. The room toasted, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I felt like I could breathe normally again. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that makes Boston feel like the center of the universe. I woke up in my brownstone, made coffee in my kitchen, and read the sports section of the Globe like a normal person living a normal life. Except nothing about my life was normal anymore. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. with text messages from people who'd been at the dinner, people who'd heard about the dinner from people who'd been there, and people who'd seen the videos that were already circulating on social media. Sloan, apparently, had live-streamed parts of my presentation, turning Ashley's final humiliation into entertainment for her Instagram followers. The hashtag #OurFarewellDinner was trending locally, and the comments ranged from sympathetic to savage. Greg Turner is my new hero. Ashley Marquette is what happens when Instagram becomes your personality. This is why you don't cheat on financial analysts. They have spreadsheets for everything. But I knew Ashley well enough to know that public humiliation would only make her more dangerous, not less. She was the kind of person who doubled down when cornered, and last night had definitely cornered her. I was right. At 11 a.m., my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Ashley standing on my front steps with a man I didn't recognize. Middle-aged, expensive suit, the kind of confident posture that screamed lawyer. I opened the door but kept the chain latch engaged. "Greg Turner?" the man said. "I'm Robert Kellerman, Ms. Marquette's attorney. We need to discuss your harassment of my client." "There's nothing to discuss. Everything I've done has been legal and justified." Ashley stepped forward, her face a mask of cold fury. "Legal? You destroyed my business. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. You've been stalking me for weeks. I exposed your lies and your infidelity. If that destroyed your business, maybe your business was built on a foundation of lies." Kellerman pulled out a folder. "Mr. Turner, my client is prepared to file for a restraining order and pursue charges for harassment, stalking, and intentional interference with business relationships, unless you're prepared to make this right." "Make what right?" "Public apology, retraction of all accusations, financial compensation for the business relationships you've damaged, and a signed agreement to cease all contact with Ms. Marquette." I looked at Ashley through the gap in the door. She was wearing designer sunglasses that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and her perfectly styled hair looked like she'd just stepped out of a magazine. Even in defeat, she was still performing. "And if I refuse?" "Then we'll see you in court," Kellerman said, "and we'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you really are." I closed the door, removed the chain latch, and opened it fully. "You want to know what kind of man I really am? Let me show you." I walked over to my laptop and pulled up a video file that Manny had sent me that morning. Security camera footage from the Fairmont Copley Plaza, showing Ashley and Luca together in the hotel bar 3 days ago. "This was taken Wednesday night," I said, turning the screen so they could see it. While Ashley was texting me about wanting to reconcile, she was actually meeting with Luca to plan their next move. The video showed Ashley and Luca in what appeared to be an intimate conversation, their heads close together, her hand on his arm in a gesture that looked anything but platonic. "That doesn't prove anything," Kellerman said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It proves that Ashley was lying when she said her relationship with Luca was over. It proves that her apology to me was manipulative theater designed to buy time while she figured out her next strategy." I clicked to the next video file. This one was taken yesterday morning. Ashley and Luca apartment hunting in the North End. Ashley's face went white. You've been following me. I've been documenting your behavior, just like you've been documenting mine. The difference is that my documentation shows someone defending himself against a coordinated campaign of lies and manipulation. Your documentation shows someone who can't keep her story straight for more than 24 hours. Kellerman was studying the videos with the expression of a lawyer who was beginning to realize his client had been less than honest with him. Mr. Turner, regardless of my client's personal relationships, your response has been disproportionate and potentially illegal. Has it? Let's see. I pulled out my own folder, courtesy of Melanie's thorough preparation. Ashley hired Rick Donovan to plant evidence on my work computer in an attempt to get me fired. That's criminal conspiracy and computer fraud. That's not, Ashley started. Ashley coordinated a social media campaign designed to damage my reputation and credibility. That's defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Kellerman was taking notes now. Ashley used business credit cards to fund her personal romantic getaway, then tried to hide the expenses by claiming they were business-related. That's fraud. Greg, stop, Ashley said, but her voice was shaking. And Ashley made false statements to my employer about my mental state and professional conduct in an attempt to have me terminated. That's tortious interference with employment relationships. I closed the folder and looked directly at Kellerman. So, if your client wants to take this to court, I'm ready. I've got evidence, witnesses, and a really good lawyer who specializes in exactly these kinds of cases. Kellerman looked at Ashley, then back at me. Mr. Turner, perhaps we can work out some kind of mutual agreement. Both parties agree to cease all contact and refrain from further. No, I said. There's no mutual agreement here. Ashley started this war when she decided to cheat on me while planning our wedding. She escalated it when she tried to destroy my career and reputation. And she's going to finish it by living with the consequences of her choices. Ashley pulled off her sunglasses, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I saw something in her eyes that looked like genuine fear. Greg, please. I know I made mistakes, but you're destroying my entire life. You destroyed your own life, Ashley. I just made sure everyone could see what you'd done. I'll lose everything, my business, my reputation, my friends. You should have thought about that before you decided to betray everyone who trusted you. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating one last desperate play. Fine, she said finally. You want to destroy me? Go ahead. But don't think this makes you the good guy, Greg. You're just as vindictive and manipulative as you claim I am. Maybe, but I'm vindictive and manipulative in service of the truth. You were vindictive and manipulative in service of lies. Ashley turned and walked toward the street where Luca was waiting in his Tesla. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his posture, the body language of a man who was beginning to understand that his romantic conquest came with more baggage than he'd bargained for. Kellerman lingered on my doorstep. Mr. Turner, for what it's worth, I think you handled this situation with remarkable restraint. Restraint? I've seen what people do when they discover this level of betrayal. You could have done much worse. After they left, I sat in my living room and tried to figure out how I felt. Victorious? Vindicated? Exhausted? All of the above? My phone rang. Jules. Dude, have you seen the news? What news? Check Channel 5. Ashley's story just went viral. I turned on the television and found myself watching a local news segment about social media justice and public shaming in the digital age. The anchor was discussing my farewell dinner as an example of how private disputes could become public entertainment in the age of smartphones and Instagram. They showed clips from Sloane's live stream, interviewed relationship experts about the ethics of public revenge, and even got a comment from a law professor about the legal implications of recording private conversations. But the most interesting part was the interview with 3 of Ashley's former clients, all of whom had canceled their contracts after learning about her personal drama. When you hire a wedding planner, you're trusting them with the most important day of your life, one woman said. If they can't maintain their own relationships, how can you trust them to handle yours? The segment ended with a brief interview with Ashley herself, conducted outside Luca's restaurant in the North End. She looked tired and defensive, her usual polished appearance replaced by the kind of raw vulnerability that doesn't photograph well. "This has been a very difficult time for me," she said. "I made some mistakes in my personal life, but the response has been completely disproportionate. I hope people will remember that there are two sides to every story." The reporter asked if she had any regrets. "I regret trusting people who turned out to be vindictive and cruel," Ashley said, "but I don't regret following my heart." I turned off the television and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the Boston skyline. Somewhere out there, Ashley was probably planning her next move, maybe a fresh start in a new city, maybe a comeback strategy, maybe just a quiet life with Luca away from the spotlight she'd courted for so long. But that was her problem now, not mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Tara. "Saw the news. How are you holding up?" I typed back, "Better than expected. Thanks for everything. What's next for you?" I looked around my brownstone, the home I'd almost lost, the life I'd almost given up for someone who saw me as nothing more than a placeholder until something better came along. Next, I get back to living my boring, predictable life. Turns out I kinda like it. Outside my window, the sun was setting over Boston Harbor, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that no Instagram filter could improve. It was beautiful in a simple, honest way that didn't need an audience to appreciate it. I made myself dinner, opened a beer, and sat down to watch the Red Sox play a meaningless October game against a team whose name I'd already forgotten. It was perfect.